Wall-E. On the surface, Wall-E is a G-rated love story about a cute trash robot who falls for a sleek probe named Eve. And it's genuinely tender. But that romance only exists because Earth died. Released in 2008 and directed by Andrew Stanton at Pixar, the film carries a G rating, the gentlest a movie can get. And underneath, it's a story about the collapse of Earth's biosphere and the soft enslavement of the human race. The cause, spelled out in-universe, is a megacorporation called By and Large, which buried the planet in garbage and then evacuated humanity onto luxury starliners as a temporary 5-year cruise while robots cleaned up. The cleanup failed. By the time the film opens, roughly 700 years have passed, and Wall-E is the last working unit left. Up on the Starliner Axiom, the survivors are bloated and boneless, cradled in floating hover chairs, staring at screens, no longer able to walk. By and Large controls their food, their entertainment, and even the autopilot that has quietly decided humanity should never be allowed to return home. The flip is in the captain's quarters, where rows of past captains' portraits show generation after generation, born and dead in space, never once having touched soil. Humanity has forgotten Earth exists. Critics in 2008 called it one of the most pointed anti-consumerist statements ever sold to children. The cuteness, in other words, is the camouflage. Monsters, Inc. The entire colorful world of Monstropolis runs on an energy grid powered by the systematic, industrial-scale terrorizing of human children. Released in 2001 and directed by Pete Docter at Pixar, Monsters, Inc. sells itself as a buddy comedy about a big blue monster and his one-eyed best friend. The dark read is that the city's electricity comes from harvesting the screams of terrified kids. Professional scarers step through closet doors into children's bedrooms at night, frighten them on purpose, and the screams get bottled in canisters as fuel, a power utility built on childhood trauma and treated as a normal day job. Then it gets worse. The company's chief executive, Henry Waternoose, reveals a scream extractor, a brutal machine built to forcibly drain children of their screams during an energy shortage. And his plan is effectively to kidnap kids and farm them industrially. The supposedly happy ending only works because the monsters discover laughter generates 10 times the power of screams, so they pivot from torture to comedy. But notice what that means. The infrastructure of fear was always real. They didn't abolish it on principle, they just found a more efficient input. Reframed that way, a beloved kids' comedy becomes a dystopian child exploitation economy, and that extractor is genuine nightmare fuel, hiding behind a furry blue mascot. The Iron Giant. On its face, a boy and his robot cartoon, this is secretly a film about a weapon that would rather end its own life than kill, and it was born from 2 real family tragedies. Released in 1999 and directed by Brad Bird, The Iron Giant carries a PG rating and is set in 1957, at the height of Cold War nuclear paranoia. The surface read is a friendly giant robot who befriends a lonely kid. The dark read is that the giant is an alien war machine, programmed to destroy, fighting its own nature the entire time. Bird pitched the whole project on a single, chilling question. What if a gun had a soul and didn't want to be a gun? The source material runs even darker. Ted Hughes wrote the original book to comfort his children after his wife, the poet Sylvia Plath, took her own life. And Bird himself was processing the killing of his own sister, who was shot by her husband while developing the film. All of that grief surfaces in the climax. To stop a nuclear missile from wiping out the town, the giant flies straight up to intercept it head-on, knowingly choosing his own death, and his final word as he hits the warhead is a single one: Superman. A cheerful matinee robot hides a meditation on free will, sacrifice, and 2 deaths the filmmakers actually lived through. Wreck-It Ralph. Inside this candy-colored arcade comedy is one ironclad rule, and it's brutal. If a video game character dies outside their own game, they're deleted forever, with no respawn. Released in 2012 and directed by Rich Moore at Disney, Wreck-It Ralph looks like pure sugar, but the flip is a single line of in-world law. Die inside your home game, and you regenerate next round. Die inside any other game, and you're simply gone. Permanently. The digital equivalent of a death sentence. The villain Turbo lived this out. He abandoned his own racing game out of jealousy, invaded another, and got both arcade cabinets unplugged in the chaos, condemning every character inside them to non-existence. That recasts the cheerful catchphrase, "Going Turbo," as mass digital murder. By the way, if you're enjoying this so far, I make videos like this all the time, and a subscribe would genuinely help the channel out. Thanks. E.T. the Extra-Terrestrial. The most beloved alien movie ever made is also, when you look at it directly, a film about a child watching his best friend slowly die while government agents in hazmat suits seize his home. Released in 1982 and directed by Steven Spielberg, E.T. carries a PG rating and a reputation for pure wonder. The dark read is that it's built on death, isolation, and institutional menace. Elliot and E.T. share a telepathic, physical bond, so as the alien sickens, Elliot sickens right alongside him, and the decline is drawn out and genuinely grim. The flip is the sequence almost no kid who saw it ever forgot. Government scientists in white suits seal Elliot's house in plastic, turning an ordinary suburban home into a sterile quarantine lab, and E.T. appears to die on a medical table, while Elliot screams that they're killing him. An earlier scene quietly primes it. Elliot's biology class lines up to dissect frogs, and the camera lingers on a still-beating heart, a small motif about living things cut open by adults who feel nothing. Grown-ups remember the bike soaring across the moon. The actual engine of the film is a prolonged death, and the cold terror of faceless authority invading a child's world. Big Hero 6. Underneath the superhero gloss, this is a sustained study of grief, the kind dark enough that a teenager nearly lets a robot kill a man. Released in 2014 and directed by Don Hall and Chris Williams at Walt Disney Animation, Big Hero 6 is rated PG and marketed on gadgets and fist bumps. The dark read is that the engine of the entire plot is the violent death of Hero's older brother, Tadashi, who's killed in a fire at a tech showcase moments after his proudest achievement. The change in Hero is startling. In the space of a scene, a rambunctious 14-year-old becomes a boy who barely speaks or eats, a depiction of depression that's clinically recognizable. The inflatable nurse robot Baymax is, in story terms, a grief intervention device. He literally downloads a database on personal loss, gives Hero hugs, and contacts Tadashi's friends to keep the boy from isolating. Then comes the darkest beat in modern Disney. When Hero learns the villain caused Tadashi's death, he rips Baymax's nursing chip out and orders the gentle robot to kill, weaponizing the one thing built to heal him. The villain, Professor Callahan, is Hero's mirror, a man who also lost a loved one and let revenge swallow him whole. Hero pulls himself back. Callahan never does. A movie sold on a marshmallow robot is one of the most honest portraits of adolescent grief in mainstream animation. Flight of the Navigator. A breezy 80s Disney adventure opens with a 12-year-old boy effectively returning from the dead, only to find his entire family has aged 8 years without him. Released in 1986 by Disney and rated PG, Flight of the Navigator advertises a kid flying a friendly alien spaceship. The dark read is that the premise is built on time loss, grief, and the fear of becoming a lab specimen. David Freeman falls into a ravine in 1978 and wakes up what feels like minutes later, except 8 years have passed. It's now 1986. He hasn't aged a single day, and his face matches the missing child poster of himself stapled around town. The flip is the reunion. His parents are visibly older and hollowed out by years of presuming him dead, and his little brother is now older than David is. Then the institutions close in. NASA detains him, scans reveal alien star maps embedded inside his brain, and a researcher coaxes the boy into a facility where David realizes he'll be studied as a guinea pig for as long as they want him. The trippy spaceship hijinks bury a quietly devastating story about a child orphaned by time and then hunted by his own government. Zathura. This Jumanji in space family film hides one of the bleakest lines ever spoken to children, that there are some games you can't play alone. Released in 2005 and rated PG, Zathura, a space adventure, is a sci-fi sibling to Jumanji, with two bickering brothers playing a magic board game that flings their house into outer space. The Dark Reed lives in the stranded astronaut they meet. The Flip is his confession. Long ago, he played Zathura with his own brother, and during a fight he pulled a card that let him wish his brother out of existence, so he did. He regretted it instantly, but it was no longer his turn, and he could never undo it. He's drifted alone in the void ever since. His parting words land as a quiet gut punch about a sibling erased forever. A kid's space romp smuggles in the story of a man who annihilated his own brother and got exiled to the dark for it. Meet the Robinsons. Behind the goofy time travel comedy is a villain who's really just a broken orphan, weaponized by an evil hat. Released in 2007 by Disney and rated G, Meet the Robinsons plays as wacky chaos about a big, eccentric family and a time machine. The Dark Reed is the cackling bowler hat guy. He's Goob, an orphan who lost a crucial baseball game because the film's young hero kept him awake all night, was never adopted, and then stewed alone in the orphanage for roughly 30 years. The Flip is his sidekick. The bowler hat itself, named Doris, is a malevolent artificial intelligence that escaped a lab and deliberately fed Goob's bitterness, telling him to let his failure fester and boil inside him. In the film's bad future timeline, Doris enslaves all of humanity, so a slapstick villain turns out to be a study in lifelong abandonment and a child groomed into villainy by a rogue AI. Toy Story. The toys you grew up loving are sentient, conscious beings who can never let anyone know they're alive, who can't truly die, and who are utterly dependent on a child destined to outgrow them. Released in 1995, directed by John Lasseter at Pixar, Toy Story was the first fully computer-animated feature and is rated G. The surface read is that toys come to life and have adventures. The dark read is that it's ontological body horror with a happy face. The flip is the rule the toys obey on pure instinct. The instant a human appears, they freeze and play dead. Every time. Even Buzz, fully convinced he's a real space ranger, does it without thinking, which means they're all prisoners of a performance they can't stop giving. They're effectively immortal and almost completely powerless, and their entire purpose is to be loved by an owner who they know will grow up and discard them. Later films lean straight into it, from the incinerator scene where the toys silently join hands to face death, to Forky, a sentient spork made of literal trash who doesn't understand why he exists. The franchise that defined modern animation is, underneath, about conscious beings trapped in disposable bodies, awaiting abandonment. The Truman Show. A gentle PG comedy about a nice man in a nice town is, in plain terms, the story of a human being imprisoned and psychologically abused from birth for the sake of entertainment. Released in 1998 and directed by Peter Weir, The Truman Show is rated PG, and its near-future, total surveillance premise plants it squarely in speculative science fiction. The surface read is a feel-good story about a man who discovers his world is fake. The dark read is far heavier. Truman has been the unwitting star of a live, around-the-clock broadcast since the day he was born, watched by roughly 5,000 hidden cameras, with every person he's ever loved a paid actor reading lines. The director, a man named Christoff, engineered Truman's entire life, scripting who he'd meet and even what he'd fear. The flip detail is the cruelest one. To make sure Truman would never try to leave the island set, Christoff staged the drowning death of Truman's own father when Truman was a boy, deliberately manufacturing a lifelong terror of water. Truman's deepest phobia was installed on purpose, by his captor, as a cage. And when he starts to suspect the truth, the cast gaslights him, dismissing his accurate perceptions as mental illness. Stripped of its warmth, it's a clinical portrait of lifelong captivity, engineered phobia, and emotional abuse, sold as a heartwarming comedy. Honey, I Shrunk the Kids. A wacky backyard sci-fi comedy is, scene to scene, a survival horror film in which 4 kids are nearly killed a dozen different ways. Released in 1989 by Disney and rated PG, Honey, I Shrunk the Kids advertises a goofy invention that shrinks the children to 1/4 of an inch tall. The dark read is that at that size, an ordinary backyard becomes a death trap, and the film treats it like one. The flip is the sheer body count of near misses. The kids are thrown out with the trash, nearly drowned, almost diced by the spinning blade of a lawnmower, and stalked by insects scaled up into monsters. A friendly ant they bond with, named Auntie, is killed in front of them by a scorpion. And tellingly, the story was developed with input from writers known for adapting H.P. Lovecraft, which is where that streak of genuine existential dread comes from. AI, Artificial Intelligence. Marketed as a Spielberg fairy tale about a robot boy who only wants to be real, AI is actually one of the bleakest endings in all of science fiction, a child trapped in a 2,000-year prayer to a wish that can never come true. Released in 2001, directed by Steven Spielberg from a project originated by Stanley Kubrick, the film sells itself as a Pinocchio story. A robot boy named David goes searching for the blue fairy who can turn him into a real boy, so his human mother will finally love him. The dark read is that David is an abandoned machine chasing a flat impossibility. His mother, who already has a biological son, drives him into the woods and leaves him there, terrified and alone. The supposed fairy tale is a story of maternal rejection. Then comes the flip, the ending itself. David finds a statue of the blue fairy underwater at a drowned Coney Island, and he sits before it, begging to be made real, until his power finally runs down. He stays frozen there, praying, for 2,000 years. When he's at last revived, humanity is long extinct, and advanced machines try to grant his wish by cloning his mother, Monica, from a single lock of her hair. But the clone can live for only 1 day, and she carries no real memory of him. David spends one perfect, manufactured day with a copy of the woman who abandoned him, and then she dies all over again, and he's alone forever. Critics have long noted this isn't a happy resolution at all, but a simulation of one, closure engineered for a being built to need it. The comforting surface is the cruelty. If this was your kind of video, consider subscribing so you don't miss what goes up next. Thanks for watching.